What is good, guys? It's Ronald, also known as Youcapper from sportsmemo.com. Welcome to a special episode of Let's Cap. I have an all-star panel of handicappers with me today to help break down the NBA Finals. We got Chris B. Capping on Twitter, Finessed the Books, Nerfy Finesse right there, Josh at Punt School, Shark and Sports right there with the glasses on. He's ready to roll. Guys, this is going to be a fun show. Thank you guys for all tuning in, both on Twitter and on YouTube. If you are on Twitter, though, I'm not going to be able to see your comments. So head over to YouTube and we can try to get your questions or some of your comments in the video here. With that said, none of these guys need an introduction because y'all know who they are. So we're going to get straight into it. The way we're going to rock, we're going to go bench. We're going to compare teams first. Benches versus bench, starters versus starters, who we think is going to win game one or how we think game one is going to go. Then we're going to go into series predictions and then the MVP prediction. So that's how we're going to rock today. First off, obviously we're going to see, both of these teams are solid defensively. Both of them are solid offensively. However, how they played in the regular season is, I think, a tale of two tales, right? There's the first half of the season and the second half of the season. Boston started killing it in the second half of the season. Some kind of light switched for them. They became the number one defensive team, even at some portions, number one offensive team. Boston, they've had a roster Celtics, they had a roster that had to churn a little bit. A lot of injuries. Then Clay coming back afterwards. There's a lot of things moving for Golden State. So some of their stats that we look at during the regular season, it really you can't bring that over to the playoffs here. But I really want to focus first on the bench here. Josh, I want to start with you. Boston's bench here, we got guys like Grant Williams coming off. I think earlier in the season, they had a different roster, right? They had the trades that went down during the trade deadline. They had Schroeder and stuff. Those guys aren't there now. So the bench they're really looking at Pritchard, Nesmith, Williams, and on Boston and Golden State side, I feel like they've gotten a little bit deeper, but it really depends on whether or not these guys come back healthy, right? There's Peyton, there's Iggy, there's these guys on the bench that could play a strong defensive role here, but are they going to be healthy enough to make an impact? Let's talk about the benches, Josh.
Yeah, the benches is an interesting matchup. And I think, like you said, with the Warriors in particular, when it comes to guys like Otto Porter Jr., Gary Payton, Iguodala, are they healthy? Are they going to play? Can they fit into the rotation? And it's going to matter a lot because those are guys who can match up with the size and length that Boston has at the wing position. So that becomes really important for Steve Kerr to be able to utilize those guys effectively. I mean, the most important bench piece, obviously, for the Warriors has been Jordan Poole, but I think Boston has the perfect counter for that with Derek White. You have someone who is fantastic defensively, navigating screens both on and off the ball. And that's, I think, something that's really paramount against the Warriors, where it's not so much that on-ball pick and roll you need to be wary of. It's you need players who are able to navigate off-ball screens, stick to guys who are sort of weaving and ducking through, making those backdoor cuts. And that's where I think Boston really has a tremendous edge. I think Derek White, like I said, becomes pivotal in that regard against Jordan Poole, and you have Marcus Smart, who's pivotal in that regard against Steph Curry in those off-ball situations. So a lot of the bench, I think, is going to come down to health and availability for the Warriors because I think that those pieces matter more in this series than they have in previous series. And if they aren't, then, Kerr's going to have to get a little bit creative. You're not going to get productive minutes from guys like Nemanja Bjelica in a series like this. I think he's just going to get eaten alive personally. So, it comes down to a little bit of creativity, I think, from Kerr's side. Boston, I think we know what their rotation is going to be. Like you said, it's going to be Derek White. It's going to be Grant Williams. Probably going to be Peyton Pritchard. It's not going to go much deeper than that. Udoka doesn't like to go more than 8 deep in his rotations anyway. Maybe there are certain situations where we get Tice minutes, I think, in a matchup like this. They're still going to hurt me immensely, but he might be a little bit more valuable, I think, in this particular matchup, given that the Warriors don't have that size inside. So there's no one that's necessarily going to bully him in there and, put him in his place in the way that someone like Miami and Milwaukee were able to do. So I'm going to slightly give the edge, I think, to Boston on the bench, only because I think they're a little bit more cemented in that rotation. They know what they have to do, and they have pieces to neutralize what Golden State can do, whereas health at the moment, still a little bit of a question mark for the Warriors. But, ultimately, we'll get to talking about the starters, and I think that's obviously what's going to matter most in this series in particular. I don't think the bench is necessarily going to come into play too much.
Yeah. That's a good point with some of those players coming off, especially Derek White. He played a pivotal role to close out that series. against Miami. One thing to note too, like you said, like the Golden State Warriors side, they're gonna need to be healthy. Chris, if you see Gary Payton Jr. come back, is he someone that could kind of negate that part of Derek White being there? And then also you got guys like Kuminga, and who didn't get a lot of minutes in the previous series, right? But he's someone that could probably take Tease off the dribble, something like that. I mean, you're not going to overpower him with his skinny frame, but is he someone, or are there any other guys on the Golden State Warriors bench that could match up well with guys on Boston?
Yeah, Ronald. So first of all, Josh just gave an excellent breakdown of a lot of the stuff that I was going to say. I think he made a lot of extremely valid points. But yeah, Ronald, I think the one thing that Josh said that I would echo as well is just the availability piece, right? So how healthy will the Golden State bench be, right? We got those questionable tags. We haven't seen Iguodala in the playoffs. We haven't seen Gary Payton II, since that injury in the Memphis series. So even when those guys come back, right, like sometimes it typically takes a game or two to be reacclimated in that way, right? But yes, I think so, Ronald, and I think more so. Steve Nash has a bench where a lot of the things that they do, Ronald, don't necessarily show up on the stat sheet, right? So when you look at a guy like Otto Porter Jr., he's like an intangible guy, right? His impact is not solely on the 5.5 points that he averaged or the 4 rebounds and the 2 assists that he provided, but it's more so like his defense, right? His willingness and timeliness to be able to make big shots, right? He was a +7, Ronald, throughout the playoffs when he was on the court, which is the highest plus minus of any bench player throughout either team throughout the playoffs altogether, and that's even with Jordan Poole being in as well. So I do think that those guys are like glue guys because Steph Curry will need a break, and Klay Thompson will need a break, and Wiggins will need a break. So yeah, I think I would it's really hard to give a lean right now because we don't know, like Josh said, the availability of the Golden State Warriors bench, but I do think that their bench, can play well as well. But I say all that, but as Josh said, also, I'm a big Derek White guy. I'm a big Grant Williams guy. Those guys are products of that first team and their ability to be able to defend and to be on the floor. Unless your name is Peyton Pritchard, to be playing for Udoka, you really have to be able to defend at a high level. And I think that Boston knows that. So I don't know what Peyton Pritchard minutes look like. I don't know what Daniel Theis minutes look like in this one, Ronald. And that's all. That's what I'll add.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think just through the few of us that spoken so far is really riding on the health. Finesse, what do you think about guys like Aaron Nesmith? I mean, I think the Golden State Warriors are more guard heavy, right? Especially on the bench here. I know Josh mentioned Grant Williams and Derek White as key guys coming off of the bench, and Udoka not going 8 deep. But I think with the depth of the guard depth of Golden State, is he someone that needs to make an impact in this series, or are they going to just solely rely heavily on the starters?
No, yeah, I don't think Naismith sees a fucking second on the floor. I think Josh and Chris both make great points. Obviously, I haven't had the chance to really chop it up with Josh at all. But a lot of stuff I'm hearing on my side, people leaning towards the Warriors is 2 things. And we're talking about bench, obviously, it's 2 things. It's experience and it's depth. And obviously, depth is the bench. Experience, I think, is a non-factor. We're talking about guys like Kuminga, Otto Porter, Gary Payton coming off the bench that have no finals experience. Also, guys, right, health. Not Otto Porter. Gary Payton hasn't played in what, 2 weeks now. So that's obviously, we're talking about the finals now. Every game counts. So I don't think that's a factor. And then we talk about depth. I want to know where this depth is, this Golden State depth is coming from. I like Jordan Poole. He's obviously growing in front of our eyes, but another guy that hasn't been under those bright lights. This is the finals. This is the finals. So young guy, first time here. We expect a lot of things, but it's about what we get on the floor. So I've said it before. A lot of people know I'm a Boston fan, but we're talking betting perspective. So I'm always going to try to put my clear-headedness to the front. So I'll take my bench over a lot of benches, including Miami's bench, including what Milwaukee laid out there, and most certainly including what Golden State is going to lay out there. When we're healthy and we can start Robert Williams and Big Al at the 4, I love Grant coming off the bench. I love Derek White coming off the bench, and I can appreciate Josh and Chris for bringing Derek White's name up, because that man was seeing a lot of disrespect coming his way until he started making an impact, and people who've never watched him play basketball, at least consistently, got to watch him on a big stage and got to see how he can impact the floor, maybe not necessarily all on the stat sheet. So I love what Derek White brings. His ability to shoot, definitely still more inconsistent than I like, but his ability to shoot the three, stretch the floor, his ability, we've seen him bully guys, and his ability to get to the rim, his ability to defend, like Josh said, coming off screens, and to be that grit and to be that extension of the Boston basketball we're looking for off the bench. So, these guys are giving a slight edge. I'm giving the edge to the Celtics in terms of the bench in this series. I think we do more. I'm not, guys are trusting in guys like Kuminga and Otto Porter, and I just don't see it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Shark, I want to talk to you about, if both of these teams are going to go 8 deep, right? And we're talking about first 3 off the bench. Who are you trusting more on in this matchup, the Golden State or Boston here?
Yeah, and welcome in. 11:30 minutes in. Shout out to you guys for getting in here. And I got to take a breath. I was going all over the place. Baseball going on right now. Go Phillies. But centering on this, a key point I do think here is when you talk about the bench, this is a completely different conversation than the regular season. When you're really going 5 to 7 guys deep in the second rotation, this is really just kind of a flex 1 through 5 almost, particularly with how Golden State makes their substitutions. Boston is a little bit more segregated. And I do think one key point, which of course we've talked about for now 7 years with the Warriors, doesn't matter who's coming off their bench, you can expect a game flow which is almost identical at all points in time in their home gym. Good first quarter. Beginning of the second quarter, the second unit comes in with 1 or 2 of the starters still hanging around, and they just let the team right back in the game. And, obviously as they moved around all these players, you would have think, these guys are going to play a little bit different tempo, tendency, frequency, and range, whatever you want to call it. They don't, and it's just crazy. But the bench does let down at the beginning of the second quarter. They bring the starters back to close the half, and that is the game flow. You can make a shit ton of money actually betting that exact in-game flow in the first half. Throw it back to you, Ronald, and let's discuss.
Yeah, let's talk about the starters there. I think from what I'm gathering here, the majority of the guys here on the panel are looking towards Boston as having the advantage on the bench here. So if we go towards the starters here, obviously we're gonna key in on key players like Curry and Clay, and then on the other side Tatum, right? Tatum and Brown. But it goes beyond that. You got guys at number 3 and number 4 for Boston like Horford and Smart who make an impact. Literally on both sides. So on Boston side, you can go 1 through 5 impact players. You go on Golden State side is majority 1 through 4. Right, I don't think anyone's going to give Looney any kind of respect in this type of matchup here. Shark, I'll let you start this one off. I know you ended the last one, so I'm going to let you go first on this one. In the starters matchup here, 4 against 5, right? Does Looney have enough to just kind of be there, right? To hold his own and have Golden State be able to match up a little bit?
I think at the 5 is the biggest mismatch on the court, if we're being really honest. I mean, Robert Williams is just a far superior athlete. Kevon Looney obviously was drafted, I believe, late second round 6 or 7 years ago, and was not really a rotation guy during the Kevin Durant years. Obviously, he is one of the older guys in that team going back 7 or 8 years now, which is crazy to say. But I think that matchup can be absolutely dominated by Robert Williams. But, of course, Robert Williams is very dependent on the screen and roll, not so much dribble driving himself or creating any sort of shot for himself. But, I mean, this series, if we're going to be really centered on this, let's just be honest. This is a superstar series, period. This is going to be what can Jason Tatum do, what can Jaylen Brown do, and look at the other side, historical Hall of Fame quality. Draymond, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, I've been saying this. Forget betting. I am hyped for this series. This is going to be the best series since the 4-3 LeBron series against the Dubs, of course, before Kevin Durant came over and disrupted competitive environments in the NBA for a period of time. I'm excited to watch this as a fan. I think it's going to go deep potentially, and I'm excited for it. So let's dominate.
Yeah, I think one thing to note too, like if we, especially with Looney, I feel like sometimes there's a 6th starter here with Jordan Poole, right? I mean, sometimes it's the fact that he's actually on the bench, but he's coming in playing heavy minutes, right, with the death lineup and all that stuff. Finesse, what are your thoughts on that? How what can Boston do to kind of to slow down the death lineup of Golden State?
Yeah, I mean, you call it death lineup all you want. When you're listen, a lot of what I say is gonna sound a certain way, okay? Because I'm a diehard Boston fan, but
I got you.
Listen, I'm gonna just speak facts, and you guys take it for the audience can take it for what they want. You speak death lineup all they want. They have not. Our path has been tougher, and Golden State has not played a team like us, especially defensively. You can call Dallas an elite defensive team, but that's simply not true. If you want to talk about in terms of Boston being the elite standard, that's simply not true. The reason I love our starting five is because everybody does everything. Everybody can guard at an elite level, and I think that's going to cause a problem. We're talking about starters, and I got to pull up my stats because that's what I'm about is my stats. I'm a reasonable guy. Shark mentioned something about being dependent, and while I'm not going to disagree with that. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think Boston has proved that we're not dependent on our two guys. Of course, we want our guys to ball out and make stuff easier for us on the offensive and defensive side, but we just have guys that can do it all and can explode. We saw Al have the game of his life to really help us out in that series. We've seen Marcus Smart go off, whether it's facilitating, getting his 12, 13 assists, or whether it's going off scoring wise. We talk about defensively. I'm hearing a lot of Curry, and obviously it's a big series for Curry. People can debate all they want on whether he needs this or needs that. The guy's established. The guy has, a room full of accolades, but I think a lot of eyes are going to be on him, and I think people are expecting a lot out of him. People don't like to talk about, Boston and Golden State playing this series, obviously, because there's a lot of variables, injuries, RC, like you said at the beginning of the show, rosters have changed and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just go career. Whole careers. With Marcus Smart being the closest defender to Steph Curry shooting 29% from the field. Okay, so that's whole career. That's let's not talk about the series. That's whole career. So I think, and again, this is just in the circle that I run, and I'm hearing a lot of disrespect in terms of, we're gonna see a light show and it's gonna be raining in the Bay, and that might be true. That might be true. But I think we have guys that can do it all and can really put pressure on them defensively. I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk. And we'll get to that obviously for the series. But yeah, in terms of the starters, it's tough. We all know who's dangerous on the Golden State side. But I think people underestimate, like we're talking about, 1 through 5 when it comes to Boston. So I know you're looking for an answer, RC, in terms of giving an edge to the starters. It's really tough for me because anything I say is going to sound like hate either way. But
how about this? All right, tell me this then. One word. All you gotta say is the last name. Who is the best player on the court? The first 10 players.
Oh my God, RC.
I see Josh's face right there.
That's way more than one word, bro. He said one word.
Curry, I guess.
Okay. All right. I'm not gonna say you're gonna choose Golden State just because you're saying Curry's the best player, but I could see where you're going both ways here.
Yeah.
Josh, I seen you laughing. There. It is a tough question. I know both of you guys are Celtics fans, so it is a hard question to answer. Saying someone else on the other team. What are your thoughts here on the two starting fives?
Yeah, look, firstly, Curry's the best player on the floor. I don't think we can debate that yet. But when you're looking at the starting fives for both sides holistically, how they match up, I think the one thing that people seem to be completely disregarding is Boston's defense is a completely different jigsaw puzzle for Golden State to have to work out. And I think the assumption that they're just going to come out game one, put their best foot forth and play from in front this series is wrong. Trying to figure out a defense like that takes time and takes on-court time. And so I actually think Boston is probably going to be the more game one ready in this series than what Golden State is. And obviously, the Warriors defense is elite in its own right. And Boston's offense, I think, can be stagnant at times when they get away from what they do best. But at the same time, the Warriors, regular season, they were 29th in turnover percentage in their offensive possessions. In the playoffs, they're still bottom 3. They turn the ball over a lot. Draymond turns it over a lot. Steph turns it over a lot. When those guys are sloppy, they're really sloppy. And when you're sloppy against Boston and you let that offense play in transition and not have to worry about half-court sets, the Celtics are as dangerous as any team in the NBA. And when you let the Celtics play from in front, they're a great front runner because that defense can just carry them the rest of the way through. So, when it comes to the starting five matchups, it's all going to come down to basically execution, I think. And ultimately, like I said, I trust Boston's defensive stability enough that the Warriors' offense has to essentially be perfect for the most part in order for them to go out and get the job done. And that's why I'm very confident in saying Boston probably goes home with this series at 1-1, in my opinion. I don't see the Warriors going up 2-0. And then we have a real series on our hand. Once a road team wins, that's when the series gets really, really interesting. So when it comes to starting lineup specifically, obviously the wings of Brown and Tatum pose the biggest mismatch problem, I think, for the Warriors, because you have Andrew Wiggins, so you can throw at one of them and whichever one is hotter. But aside from that, you're kind of scrambling to try and get bodies that can match up with the size and length that Boston has. Finesse said it perfectly. There's the stats on Marcus Smart when he guards Steph Curry, and I don't think that that's accidental or coincidental by any stretch of the imagination either. Because again, you have someone who is fantastic at navigating screens, not just on ball but off ball, and sticking to them, and not allowing that space to get comfortable. So it's gonna involve, I think, a lot of flexibility, especially for someone like Draymond to have to try and find these guys open in different pockets of space to what they normally run. So they're going to have to work things out on the fly, and like we've all said, this is the finals. There's not really time to work things out. You've got to be ready, and ultimately, I like the Boston Celtics defense to be ready from game one. And if they manage to steal game one and they're the ones playing from in front, then it completely changes the dynamic of the series overall. So if you want an answer starting five, I can't split them. I think that it's ultimately a coin flip, and as cliche as it might sound, I'm going to go with the better defense, and that's Boston.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris, we talked about defense right before the show, right? We were talking about how Marcus Smart got Defensive Player of the Year, but he really has, it really gets a lot of pressure off of him when he has someone like Robert Williams behind him, right? So that's one thing that we were talking about right before the show. The other thing too, we talk about Golden State's offense, but then Boston Celtics #1 defense in the league. They have defensive players 1 through 5 that can match up well with Golden State. I think people bring up Jordan Poole a lot coming off of the bench and being an automatic scorer. And the reason why he's able to do that is because defensive teams will come in and put their best defenders on Clay and Curry. But Boston has a deep enough team to put another strong defender on Poole. What can Golden State do to match up with this type of defense?
Pray. It's like, no, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. They're gonna have to break it down, Ronald. Like so I watched the Draymond Green podcast as a part of my capping, and Josh hit the nail right on the head, right? Hey, Vanessa, don't laugh at that, bro. I just want to hear what you say, man. So I think Josh hit the nail on the head earlier though, Ronald. Right before I started speaking, he talked about Boston's ability to be able to switch, right? So a lot of that #1 rated defense is the ability to be able to switch. We know Golden State typically likes to beat you from three. And I just don't see it, Ronald. I don't see somebody like so I got some numbers too. Shout out to Finesse. I got some numbers. So Steph is shooting 43% from the field right now, Ronald. Clay's shooting 46% from the field and 40% from three in the playoffs. I just don't see a world where Boston is allowing them to continue to shoot the ball that well, right? We know that Steve Kerr is going to do a really great job of making sure he prepares a game plan so that he can get the best possible looks for those guys. But I just don't see that defense falling asleep as some of these other teams have, right? When you're comparing the defense to some of the other teams that they've played already, Ronald, this does not compare to Dallas, right? Dallas did a good job of taking away the 3-point shot for Golden State, but then they didn't have any rim protection at the rim. So Golden State killed them on the inside, right? And if you go back to the series before that, Memphis, was all about just trying to score the ball and not really locking down a lot. As Josh said earlier as well, and Draymond mentioned this in his podcast also. He said they asked him the question, Ronald, if Boston Celtics win this series, what happens? And he said if the Boston Celtics win this series, it's going to be because the Golden State Warriors didn't take care of the ball. And he admitted that they're a sloppy offense. Mm-hmm. They don't take care of the ball well. And you don't want to do that. They averaged about 13 turnovers in the postseason. And I think I want to say Golden State, Boston forces about 17 a game. So that's significant, Ronald. Like those,
Yeah.
like that trend in general is extremely significant. I don't see Clay getting those wide open looks. I think they make it extremely hard for Steph. They're gonna make Steph work on the defensive end as well. We might see some zone from Golden State, but yeah, Ronald, I think because Golden State has not ran into a defensive jigsaw, that is this Boston Celtics defense. It's gonna be extremely hard for them to execute their game plan.
Yeah, one thing to note too, I was looking at the playoff stats here. The turnover percentage is actually really tight here. Boston Celtics 14.6% versus Golden State Warriors at 15%. So both teams really are turning over the ball, but I think defensively Boston has had the tougher opponents, right? With especially with Miami being one of the top defensive teams in the league as well. So that's a good breakdown from everyone here on the starters. Now it gets to the key part, what everyone wants to see and hear is game one of the series. I think Boston here has been more battle tested, right? But now we have Golden State who has more rest. They're coming off of an early win, just won only to game 5 of the series, and Boston coming off a 2-game 7 series in a row. Is there an impact with them being too battle tested, right? Is their body worn down at this point, playing so physically against these types of teams? And Finesse has a face showing. I want you to go ahead and respond to that. I mean, like you think about the defensive side of it and the physicality that they just played in game 7. You come in with Golden State with a 6-day rest. Is there no impact? Is not having more rest not an advantage?
Yes, normally it is, right? And nothing we say is gonna really matter, right? We don't know the rust versus rest. We don't really know. I tend to lean towards rest being more of an issue with a team relying on shooting, obviously, but we don't know. I mean, the rest I think does everybody well this time of year. Everybody's banged up. I just think we're too young for that. Okay, we don't got a group of 30, 31-year-olds worrying about every single day of rest. Obviously not ideal, right? Playing 2 7-game series against 2 teams that bunch of dogs, right? Just full of dogs. So obviously not ideal, but and that's what I said earlier. This whole experience thing, I think we can kind of throw it out the window in terms of Boston not having the experience to compete. I think that's just false, right? We've straight battle tested all throughout the playoffs. We're on that revenge tour that everybody I'm sure has seen on ESPN and shit like that. So we're on that revenge tour. We're slaying, demons from our past, right? And now it's the Goliath, right? And I just think we're being undervalued in so many ways. If you're just talking about the rust versus rest, I don't think it's more important than other discussions that we've had in terms of bench versus starters, things like that. Just 1 through 5 matchups.
Yeah. So real quick take. Do you have anything on game 1 before we head on to the next guy?
I'm gonna stay away. I like my team, but I'm gonna stay away. I think this is, and that might change, but as of right now, we're gonna talk about the series, and I'll have a lot more thoughts on the series. There's the beauty of having a break. We get to really dive into these games. We got 3-4 days to really dig deep into every nook and cranny. So I think I'm gonna stay away. I think it's more of a watch and learn. I think we have a great chance to win this game. I think we have a great chance to succeed early in this game, which I know is going to be heavily contrarian, being that it's in the Bay. But if I had a heaviest lean right now, I think it'll be something Boston early, like a Boston first quarter, maybe attacking the team total, something like that. But I think I'm gonna stay away, Ronald, and that might change. But as of right now, that's kind of how I feel about game 1 at least.
Okay. Yeah.
I wanted to mention one more thing, and I'll be super quick. A lot of people are talking about environmental and trends and how we match up and things like that. The Bay hasn't been as scary to Boston as we might think. So just a couple of trends. First of all, this really has nothing to do with the Bay, but last 12 versus Golden State, Boston is 10-2 against the spread. Right now, let's talk about the Bay. We're 8-1 against spread last 9 in Golden State. So everybody's making a lot about, listen, we in the Bay, Boston's gonna have to play from behind. I don't think that's necessarily as easy as a lot of people making it out to seem, and that's all I have, RC.
Okay, yeah, not a problem. I like your take on that early Boston. You sometimes, like what people are mentioning in the chat, is extra rest. especially for jump shooters, kind of give them a disadvantage, right? They gotta warm back up and get into that groove. Shark, what are your thoughts on that type of take? What are you doing for game one of the series?
Oh, gotta take a breath. There's a lot going on here. Hunt said it. We might not see the typical Dubs blowout in game one because they have so much rest. And at what point does it become almost like a pseudo off season before the series starts? Of course, if you go through the playoffs, we've been tracking this. We've done it very effectively. In round one, Golden State did cover game one and game two at home. And then, of course, round two at Memphis, totally different environment starting on the road. In the Western Conference Finals against Dallas, same thing. Home game one, home game two, 2-0 ATS. And Finesse, you make a great point. I was going to bring that up. Boston has owned them on the road and in just the recent history of this series, going back over the last handful of years. Boston has won straight up 6 out of the last 7 games. And they also have won, I believe, 6 out of the last 7 in Golden State. And I can recall, obviously, before I started my channel, and obviously started working with you fine guys, but Boston always traveled incredibly well to the West Coast with this group. It didn't matter who it was. I remember they would show up in Portland against Dame, the boys. They're traveling up and down the coast. They always show up against the Clippers, Lakers. Something about them travels really well. But here's the key point. When we look at those two series, the first round and the third round for the Dubs, something I discussed coming into both of those series was how much Denver had owned the Dubs in the regular season the previous 4 seasons, and how much Dallas had owned the Dubs in the regular season the previous 4 seasons. So this is the exact same environment where the opponent, Boston, has owned them in the regular season. And based on historical data here, if Boston dominates them so much and take the names off the jersey, but we're really looking at an unbiased scenario where it's not Steph Curry and these boys 3-time champions, Boston should be favored here. When you own a team to this degree over 5 seasons, Boston should be favored. And I'm telling you guys, Boston is sexy. We got fans in the group here. I know times 2. We got Punt out in Australia. We got Finesse up in Boston, I think. I'm a Knicks fan, so I got no skin in the game. I probably never will as a fan. Something I just accepted a long time ago. But I do think the Warriors actually, to a certain degree, have a buy low environment here, given how much Boston has dominated them now for 4 seasons in a row. Game 1's going to be tough. A lot of unknowns. Sharp line. Boston did get there in the regular season in the most recent matchup on March 16th. Of course, that was the game Marcus Smart slid into Steph Curry's knee, knocked him out for, I believe, a handful of games. I think the Warriors lost 7 out of the next 8 games or something like that down the stretch. So you get a one-off revenge game. You also ask yourself a question, how much of the Dubs going to show up? Because that pissed them off to a certain degree. Marcus Smart, not going to shout at the guy, hell of a competitor. We'll never take that away from him, but he can ruffle some feathers, that's for sure. So tons of narratives, tons of dynamics. I do lean Dubs just based on what we saw in round 1 and round 3 in the same environment, off of rest as well. As Josh suggested, Boston does bounce back better than any team in 2022. So I think as a general look, Dubs game 1, Boston regroup game 2. Probably the best early lean, but nothing official for me here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the Warriors game 1, Boston game 2, kind of that zigzag theory, right? One thing to know, I just want to mention too, before we get to Josh, since 2018-2019 playoffs, teams coming off a series that ended early versus teams coming off of game 7, 8-2 straight up, 7-3 against the spread, including 2-0 straight up and against the spread. These current playoffs, it happened in the conference finals for the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference. Warriors took the W and the Heat took the W. Boston lost that game. That's kind of like the same, to me, sort of the same situation here. And another thing too to note with Kerr in the Golden State Warriors in game 1 of the series, 10-1 straight up, 9-2 against the spread as single-digit home favorites since Kerr took over in the playoffs. Do you look at these? I mean, you just hearing those trends, Josh, I don't know if you looked at them, but just hearing those trends, are those things that actually mean anything, or what are your thoughts on those types of things, and then go into what your take is on the game?
For me personally, I couldn't give a shit. Like, that's just how I look at games. Like, I don't take trends. I take them with a grain of salt. I don't put a whole lot of emphasis in them. I like to look at the matchup specifically and then the data and how that correlates to each individual team. And looking at this situation, I mean, you know, you guys have all brought up the situations, you know, the ATS situations, straight up situations when the team has more rest. And, you know, I think the conference finals, though, was completely different. I mean, I was on Miami game 1. I was on the Dubs game 1 because, you know, you're talking about 2 teams coming off a game 7 where they had 1 day's rest and then had to go back on the road. And that's a completely different ask altogether than, you know, a Boston team who, yeah, they played a game 7, but we're talking 4 days in between. So, you know, there's proper amount of rest there to be had. It's, you know, it's almost like a luxury for them at this point in time. So I don't put a ton of emphasis in that rest situation. And, you know, I probably would argue that maybe a little bit of rust for Golden State does show up in those early few minutes in particular. So Boston early, maybe a good look in game 1. I don't have a game 1 play officially. I think that the Celtics are absolutely live to win it, but I did take position on Boston to win the series already before game 1. And a lot of people have asked, you know, why not wait for them to lose game 1, buy them in game 2? I just think that they're live to win game 1. That's why. It's as simple as that. You know, I bought Miami game 1, and then I bought Boston to win the series after game 1 in that particular series. Whereas this one, I don't think it's quite as premeditated that the Warriors are going to go out there and get the job done comfortably in game 1. So I'd rather take position now on the Celtics prior to tip off. I think, like I said, they're live in both these games in the Bay, and I think that they go back at 1-1 at worst, personally.
Yeah, like you said, they're live to win. The line is telling us that because it's only 3.5. You would expect something, you know, if the rest really meant something, maybe the line would have been more, right? So, Chris, what is your take on this? What are you looking at for game 1?
Yeah, so while I think Finesse and Josh and Shark all made really, really great points. I'll wrap up by saying this, Ronald. I think I'd be looking towards, especially Josh. Josh made a really good point for the Boston thing. For me, Ronald, I do look at, you know, the psychology. I look at the trends as well, and a lot of the trends for me back Golden State in this spot. Right, we know that they haven't lost in the Bay. They're covering this 3.5 by, you know, a lot more points, but that line is, I think, extremely sharp, right? Couple trends though, Ronald, besides the ones that you gave already. In series game 1 so far in the playoffs, Boston is 1-2 straight up, 0-3 ATS, right? So if you take away what they barely won game 1 against you know, the Nets in the first round, but they did. But if you take away, you know, that shot, then they 0-3, right? So for me, what that's telling me psychologically is they typically bounce back, right? They're typically, and I know Shark said it already. I think going into game 7, they were 7-0 ATS, you know, in revenge game factors this postseason. So I think they're 8-0 now. So I'm looking for them to get punched first again, Ronald. The Celtics are 0-1 ATS and straight up as an away team in game 1s. Opponents are winning those games by 11 points. The Warriors are 16-8 straight up and 13-9-2 ATS with the average margin of victory of 7 points when they're the more rested team than their opponent. Add in the fact that their opponent is winning at a 50% clip or better, and that number goes to 10-4 straight up and ATS with the average margin of victory of being about 8 points. But then these ones right here, Ronald, just kind of like almost solidified it for me. But I will say I haven't placed the ticket yet. The Celtics are 10-13 straight up, 12-11 ATS when they're the less rested team than their opponent throughout the season, right? This was the case. We saw that with in the last round with the Heat. And then in game 1s, Ronald, I think I typically stay away from historical trends, but I think this one is extremely important. So in game 1 of NBA Finals since 2015, the home team is 7-0 straight up and 6-1 ATS with the average margin of victory about 14 points. Within those 7 games, the Warriors are 4-0 straight up and 3-1 ATS during that time span. So typically, what I'm saying is the home team does win and cover 7-0 straight up, 6-1 ATS in game 1s, Ron. Dating back to 2015.
Real quick, maybe someone else wants to answer this too, but real quick, based on that trend there, do you think that has to do with traveling from East Coast to West Coast or West Coast to East Coast? Because it's first game of the series, right? Then you're gonna have to travel from the non-conference game. Did anyone want to go ahead and answer that?
Go ahead, Josh.
No, I was going to say just real quick on that, and like I look back at up until about that time frame as well, and I think this is the one series where we can say where the team with home court isn't necessarily head and shoulders better than the team that's visiting. And I think that's, for me, why I'm a little bit skeptical there, because I think these two teams, we've spoken about the starting lineups, we've spoken about the bench, and we're saying that it's basically a coin flip, maybe a little bit of an edge to the Celtics. That's the first time, if you go back and look at all those series, where the road team might actually be the ones that have that slight edge or might actually be the better prepared of the teams. Whereas I think historically, like, especially when you're looking at the Golden State dynasty era and the Lakers in the bubble, they were head and shoulders the better team going into the finals and being home court game one. So they were able to get the job done. I think this series is just going to be unique in its own right, where it's a series where I think both teams have legitimate arguments, not just for a championship, but for game-to-game situations.
Nice, yeah. No, I feel that. Anyone else want to add to that?
One more point on that, just jumping off that real quick. I think psychologically, it's really important to note, again, forget the teams. It has nothing to do with these teams or even LeBron, KD, whatever. Home game one between the top two teams in the league is much more of a desperation environment for the home team. You cannot lose the first game at home. You're immediately setting yourself on a course for disaster. So they have to come out with we're talking not one unit, 100 units more energy and more passion to dominate. And I think that's really what it is more so than anything. I'm not sure if it's travel or not, because again, there's always a huge layoff between the conference finals and a preset date for game one. So they're out there 3 or 4 days in advance, just hanging out, getting used to the time or whatever. But again, that motivation is all over the home team in game one.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense there for especially for these series. I mean, like how evenly matched these two teams are. And so with that note, let's head into just move into the series look. Who do you guys think is going to win the series? Who's going to be the champion? And on that note, go ahead and maybe give a little look towards who you think might be the MVP, because obviously whoever wins the series, that team most likely will have the MVP. That's kind of really how it goes. Chris, let's start with you here. What is your take? I think I talked to you right before this, and you really had like you were kind of like mixed a little bit with the discussion that we just had. Do you have a more firm answer? What kind of take do you have on the MVP race?
Yeah, Ronald. So real quick on the series, I think it's extremely important I think it's almost impossible to cap who you think is going to win the series based on not knowing all the unknowns, right? So we're talking about injuries. We're talking about if Iguodala comes back, excuse me, if Marcus Smart and Robert Williams can stay healthy throughout the entirety of the playoffs, right? Because we've seen those guys miss time, right? All of those factors come into play, so it's really hard. I'm not putting a future ticket in on who I think wins the series. I do think that if I had a lean, though, Ronald, I would take Boston. I love the underdog in this situation. I think that Golden State has run into a monster that they haven't seen yet. So I would look for and then we also talk about a lot, Ronald, about maturation and maturity, right? Golden State has been here with this core, right? When you think about Steph and Clay and Draymond and Kerr, like these guys have been here before. They've done this before. But we also got to factor in that Boston's been to the conference finals a couple times too, and this is that next step for them. This is that leap for them, right? And they're battle tested as well. You take down Miami, you take down KD and Kyrie, you take down Giannis, and the defending champs as well. And they've been the more resilient team for me, Ronald. I'm looking for resiliency in a spot like this. So even when they go down 0-1, if they go down 0-1 tomorrow, I'm still, going to lay because I've won so much money back in Boston off a loss, right? It's been pretty much free money because we know that they don't lose 2 games in a row. So with that being said, Ronald, if I'm going to go out on that limb and say that I'm taking Boston to win the series, then I got to take Tatum to win the MVP, right? Because I do think that Tatum shines the biggest, and this whole playoff journey for him throughout the postseason has been what he needs to kind of solidify himself and take himself from that all-star to that superstar that we think that he has the potential to be. Mm-hmm. He's doing it at a very young age because, I mean, the guy's still like, 25 years old? But, I think that if Boston does win this series, it's because offensively Tatum does enough and defensively, right? We've seen him, and I've talked about it in the spaces, Ronald, just make the right play, right? Because Miami was, crowding them and doubling them. And in games that they lost, he was getting trapped. He was spinning into that double team and turning the ball over. And the games that they won, pretty much his assist prop hit every single game because he was able to get the ball out and get it to his guys to make open shots. So I would take Tatum to win the MVP, Ronald, and take Boston to win the series.
Nice look there, Josh. I'm pretty sure I know where you're going with this one, but as far as the MVP race, would you take a favorite like Tatum, or would you kind of look towards someone with better plus odds here, like someone like Marcus Smart? We look back to Iguodala when he won the championship. He didn't put up offensive numbers, but he stopped. Right, he had the job to stop the number one player on the opposite team. Marcus Smart has to stop Steph Curry. Is that some way to look there, or would you stick with Brown or Tatum because of their offensive output here?
It's hard because I think no matter how important and influential someone like Smart might be, the media is going to try and find a way to push it to Tatum at the end of the day, and it's a media reward, and that's the sort of bottom line. And I think that we can look at years gone by where everyone knows that Steph should have won it that year when Iguodala won it. Like that's just a fact, and they're not going to make that mistake again. I think there's a fair argument potentially to be made for Jaylen Brown for me, because I think he has the best matchup offensively, especially if Wiggins is busy and occupied on Tatum. They don't have someone that can naturally match up with Jaylen Brown, and if he's able to get going early in the series and catch fire and becomes extremely reliable from deep, as well as having that ability to penetrate that defense, he can put up the type of numbers that'll at least turn heads. And so there's argument that there's value to be had there. But at the end of the day, if you want me to put my money behind something, I'd have to put it behind Tatum, and I've already put it behind Boston to win the series. So that's what I'm saying.
How many games do you have Boston winning, or what game are we going to? Game 6? You think it's going to go Game 7?
Boston in 6.
Boston in 6.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Shark. What are you thinking here? Boston in 6. What are you thinking in the series wise? Are you going Boston or Golden State? And who would you think would be the MVP in that case?
Well, one comment about the MVP. I don't think it's ever a secondary player, really. I think Iguodala got it at one point going back. That was a rare occasion, just based on how much the ball is in the hands of the top players. And Finesse, you were making a comment before about the secondary players on Boston. I mean, you got to give a shout out to about Grant Williams for basically winning Game 7 against Milwaukee, which is a 3-point barrage. And I wasn't disregarding those guys at all. I was just saying it's a superstar series. It's not going to necessarily be won and lost over the course of 7 48-minute gaps by the role players. That's all I'm saying. But that being said, when I really look at this series, I think we're going to have to go back to the 2015 NBA Finals, where you found a younger Dubs team, but you found them against a Cavaliers team that had basically a two-headed monster and a bunch of solid role players, LeBron James and Kyrie Irving. And I will say this, people are so quick to say that the Dubs have not faced this quality. I'll give you that, LeBron James and Kyrie Irving. And I don't necessarily think that just because they're 7 years older, they're going to fall off the cliff. I think they're hitting their professional prime. You look at Michael Jordan, he hit his stride. 31, 32, 33, 34. That's right where they are. These guys train faster, better, and stronger. I don't see them cliff diving whatsoever. One point I will make, going back to this series, which I think is very important, because this is the only series the Warriors have won without Kevin Durant. Because, of course, the following year they did get backdoored 4-3, which I will make the comment, if Draymond Green does not get teed up in Game 5 and suspended, they probably do win that series, and I'm not sure Kevin Durant comes over. Totally different conversation. But 2015 NBA Finals, the under was 6-0 in that series. Every single game went under, and also looking at this line, 212.5, the first game was 108-100, 208, and they continued to go down. 95-93, 103-82, 96-91, 104-91, 105-97. So you see a very consistent total, which is pace-driven. And that is what Boston wants to do. I think you could actually take the under in every single game played in this series and show significant profit. In terms of actually prognosticating the series, it is very difficult for me to call game to game. I do think if it comes down to it in Game 7, I would lean Dubs. Obviously, I love Josh, my partner in the season. We're fucking absolutely dominant. But when it comes down to it here, I will say this. People on ESPN, a lot of narratives I was listening to recently want to talk about the Celtics finally getting to the finals and therefore it's their time. I don't know about that. When it takes so long to get over the hump of the East, that's a big moment for you. How do you back that up with another big effort against, I will say this, a team that I think has underrated motivation? You look at top teams, and Tom Brady's the perfect example. He's motivating at age 45. But Bill Belichick would always give them who's talking shit on the blackboard. And who's talking shit? The entire mainstream media. Why? Because they're assuming they're over the hill. I say contrary. I say this is their time to prove it was not about Kevin Durant. They can do it. It is 2015. They are ageless. They have a new core. They're rejuvenated and they're ready to go. I think if I'm laying money on this, which I have not yet, I would lay the mile juice on the Dubs to probably get there in 5, 6, or 7. Not sure there.
All right, thanks for that, Shark. That breakdown was awesome. Finesse, I want to come to you now. Shark talked about motivation, right? Motivation. These guys, like he said, Golden State now over the hill. These guys are, pretty much going to be, their dynasty is pretty much over. Then we got the motivation on Boston's side with, these are the young up and comers who are ready to make that leap, right? To become their own dynasty. I mean, they have the makeup to do it. They're starting 5, legit number 1, probably starting 5 in the whole league. The motivation factor, is that something that's going to take precedence in this finals? What in which way would you look in that case?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to take precedence. I think we can make arguments for both sides. Immediately after they won that game, JT went over to JB. They wanted to break us up. They didn't think we could win together, right? So I think I can see the argument. There's a lot to prove, maybe more to prove on the Golden State side, but I don't think that's another thing. We can talk and have fun and conversate about it, but we got to play the game. And I think Boston poses so many problems. Of course, Golden State poses problems, right? They can go nuclear from 3 for a multi-game stretch, and everything that we're saying is not really going to matter, right? But I think Boston poses so many issues, and I think it's just getting understated. If you're going to tell me I need to worry about Draymond, I mean, I'm not scared, right? If you're telling me we need to worry about Clay being a defensive stopper, I'm not scared. If you're telling me that I didn't get the memo that Wiggins is a lockdown defender, I'm not buying that. I'm not. He had a great series, right? And I think every series is different. I think the matchup was perfect for him. Obviously, he's going against Luka a lot of times on the defensive end, and did his fair share. But on the offensive side, he's also drawing Luka a lot, and he's a lot faster, a lot more agile. We've seen what happens, right? When maybe dunk it a year. So I just think so many things are being understated, specifically size. That's something that we've had to deal with, right? Miami's not the biggest, but they're so aggressive. They were beating our asses on a lot of those screens, a lot of shit down low that just, listen, they let them play. And I can't complain about that because then, I'm on the other side complaining about too much air in the whistle. So I think size is going to pose a major threat. I think we own the paint in this series. I think the turnovers are a problem. And, I forgot who mentioned it, but turnovers are a problem on both sides. Boston knows they need to clean up. They need to clean up their act late in games, and we need to stop turning the ball over. I think the size is an issue. I think turnovers are an issue, and I think defensively, our ability to switch really anything. I think people are underestimating Marcus Smart on Steph, and there's going to be a lot of switching on both sides. So we're going to see some fascinating matchups, but I trust my 5 guys. I love Josh's take that Boston is 6. I absolutely love it because I haven't heard a lot of that, Josh, in the past couple days. So I've been back and forth. We talked about having a couple of days to really digest. The more time that goes by, the more I love the matchups on the Boston side. And you guys can call that everybody watching out there. And Ronald, I appreciate everybody in the chat. There's some crazy shit going down there in the chat. So
I see it.
Sooner rather than later.
I see it.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy shit going down there.
Yeah.
A lot of takes that somebody said Golden State's been on a dynastic playoff run. I mean, take that for what you want. But yeah, I just think it's different. I think I'm gonna go out on a little bit even more of a limb maybe than Josh. I like Boston at 7. I think Golden State poses problems, and obviously the first question everybody's gonna ask me is, you're taking Boston to win in the Bay in Game 7? Yes, I am. So I think we're battle tested. I think we've been there. I truly respect Golden State as a team, and I don't want anything to come off as disrespect. I truly respect them, but I don't think they've seen. I don't think they could really fuck with us, Ronald. I really don't. And I think people are going to learn. No,
I think the more that we talk, I mean, the more that I talk to you guys, and the more I get worried about the length and the defense of the Boston Celtics on the Golden State Warriors. But to me, like I think a lot of it also has to come through the coaching aspect of it. I think we talked about the rosters and all these things, and the ability for Kerr. So we talk about Boston being revenge, these revenge killers, right? They lose one game, they're not going to lose a second game in a row. But at the same time, you have that coaching aspect of it that we need to put into this pressure situation. So that might be something that I would want to see Udoka progress in. Obviously, they've done it through the regular season, but this is a different pressure. This is a championship game, right? They haven't been here before. Obviously, the players are there. They do the job. They get the job done. But in a coaching aspect, when there's 10 seconds in the left on the line, and the game is like a point away, is Udoka going to have that that presence to be able to make the right choice, right? You have two guys, Tatum and Brown, who want to be that guy. Are they going to be able? Is he going to be able to manage that situation and say, all right, Tatum, I want you to take that shot? You know what I mean? Like it's at the point where we're going to see lines going favored at home on both sides, right? So it's going to be tight regardless. We're going to have these games that's going to come down to that situation. Is Udoka going to have that mindset to make the right decision? That's my only thing that it comes down to, in my opinion. Anyone have a rebuttal on that part?
Yeah, Ronald, can I ask you a dumb question?
Nah, you don't have no dumb questions. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I'll ask you a smart question then. Who do you think has the coaching advantage in the series?
I think Kerr has.
It's a dumb question. I know it's a dumb question.
I think Kerr, based off experience, right? This is a different situation. I feel like it's a different situation that Udoka hasn't been in. And that, to me, that is a clear advantage on the Golden State side.
Ronald, go ahead, sir.
But let me just make a quick comment here. We were talking about this the other night, and being a good coach in the NBA is really funky because sometimes it just means you're a good personality manager. And you look at where Steve Kerr came from. I mean, he played for Phil Jackson. He was under Pop. Phil Jackson tried to hire him when he was the GM for the Knicks, and then he kind of said yes, and then rescinded and went to the Dubs. Great career choice, by the way, Steve. Great stuff. But if you really look at it, I don't think Steve Kerr's ever really been noted as being this great X's and O's type of coach. And I think Udoka definitely has an advantage there. And I think ultimately the coaching is not going to determine this series. Even you go back to the Memphis series, I would say Taylor Jenkins is far better of an NBA coach than Steve Kerr. And of course, Memphis Grizzlies will be heard from in the playoffs for years to come. Shout out to John Moran, boys. But I do think here Ime Udoka actually is a better X's and O's coach. And I do think what he did this year would, as I'm sure Finesse and Josh know very well, is take the reins from Brad Stevens, who had lost this group, who was not connecting with them, and he re-energized them. He changed the scheme. He slowed them down. He made them more unselfish. He made them buy into it. It's hard to get grown young millionaires to buy into something like that. So you got to give a shout to this guy, not only for the on-court tactical stuff, but also his psychology. I would take Udoka over Kerr any day of the week.
Josh, anything to add to Finesse? You got anything to add there?
Look, I'm in a little bit of a minority, I think, in saying that I actually think Steve Kerr doesn't get enough appreciation for what he does as a head coach. And it's exactly what Shark's saying, in that it's not that I think he's a fantastic X's and O's coach. I think he's a fantastic, man manager, if you will. And that is such an underrated quality to have in the NBA in particular. And, to get guys to basically trust you. I mean, that team will run through a wall for him, and I think Boston finally have that too. I think you have a coach now in charge of that team where these young kids are like, I'll go to war with this guy. They didn't have that with Brad Stevens, and credit to Brad Stevens as well for recognizing that and taking a step back and being like, I can't be that guy. I'm not that guy. They don't connect with me in that way. So I'm going to take a step back and find the right guy that can do that for them. And they've in my opinion, they've hit the jackpot, I think, with Udoka. So when it comes to coaching in this series, I don't think it's necessarily going to be small X's and O's that ultimately decide it. The players on the court are going to be the ones that decide it. They're the ones that have to execute at the end of the day at both ends of the floor. But I do think that if you wanted someone to draw up the better play at the end of a game, I think Udoka can draw up the better play. I really do. It just comes down to will they execute it.
Nice. Finesse is happy right now. Finesse is happy right, but the Celtics on the board here. So it looks like there's a lot of respect between both teams, a lot of respect between the Cappers here. I love the fact that we were able to navigate this game, this series, in a respectful and informative way. Man, I really appreciate you guys coming on here. Before we cut out though, it's been an hour. Man, a lot longer than I expected. I thought it was going to be like 45 minutes max. But I love the conversation that we had. Before we cut out, though, I'm going to let you guys go one by one to spit out anything you guys want to, any last comments. Let's start with Shark. Shark first.
Yeah, absolutely. And give a shout to Ronald for starting the show and bringing a lot of abundance to people that, have not gone live. Finesse, shout to you. You're great quality. It was great doing work with you. Honestly, first time working with you. Great stuff there. And Chris, of course, always just bringing the heat, brother. And Josh, I can't wait for next season. And Ronald, of course, let's get in there more in baseball. And baseball is going on right now. But shout out to a couple guys in the chat. SoCal DGen said, I do think every game goes under. The unders are the best look for me, just as a very generic remark for the series. The series is going to be back and forth. One final thing I will say, look back at Boston in the playoffs. They're very hard to predict. They'll lose on their home floor, then they'll win on your home floor. It's all over the place. So really, I think Josh is onto something with these series bets where you're not really trying to figure out these bizarre inconsistencies, which really are hard to figure out. So great stuff, guys. Great working with you. And let's have a beautiful Wednesday night here.
All right, Josh, what's up? Any last comments here?
Yeah, appreciate everyone for jumping on and Ronald for having me on as well. I'm pushing the time frame back so that I can actually make it over this side of the world. But look, I mean, everyone sort of knows my opinions here. I'm riding Boston. Ultimately, I think it's a coin flip series. And you look at the line 3.5, it's going to flip to 3.5 Boston in Boston, which tells us that the books basically make this a pick on a neutral court. And that's kind of where I have this series as well. I make this basically a pick of the series. So I'm going to take the plus money on the Celtics as a result of that. This team has shown time and again, they can go on the road. They won 2 in Brooklyn. They won 2 in Milwaukee. They won 3 out of 4 in Miami. So they're not fazed about going into another team's building and getting the job done there. I think the value is with the Celtics here. And I think if you're looking game to game and you want to look back at the box score to see what decides each individual one, I can guarantee you, look at which team dominated the offensive rebounds, look at which team took care of the basketball and limited their turnovers. Those 2 things are going to decide every single game in this series, and it's which team can basically get on top of those situations. And that's another reason why I think it's the Celtics, because of how good they are in that front court. And I think that defense is going to be able to generate just enough turnovers.
Yeah. One thing to note before we move to finesse too is when I was looking at the series score, like the exact score, Boston 4-2 was actually a slightly more favored odd than Boston 4-3. So if you're on the Boston side, it's funny that they think that they could win in 6, but not in 7 because they don't want to go to Golden State. That's just one thing that I saw on the lines. I know a lot of us look at lines and saying that lines tell a story. So that's one thing to note before we move to finesse. Finesse, any last comments?
Yeah, no, I mean, as a fan, I'm just so excited. I'm so happy for my guys. What we were able to accomplish, I think we'll be looked back and appreciate it maybe more. Obviously, you can't fully appreciate shit as it's going on, but I'm so happy and excited to see my guys work and see what they're really made of. Because now it's time. Now it's time to slay some beasts and slay the big dogs. So, and only other thing is I appreciate you, Ronald. I love and appreciate everything you do, and I'm gonna continue to support you. So. Having me on for me, I think is invaluable, and being able to chop it up with these guys, I appreciate it. So I hope you brought value to people out there. I hope people enjoyed, and shout out to you, Ronald. Always appreciating a lot of opportunity.
Thank you, man. Thank you, Chris. Any last comments?
Yeah, Ronald. I think so. First and foremost, man, shout out to Josh, shout out to Shark, shout out to Finesse. This is my first time doing a show with Josh, but I've been following Josh for a while. On with Jay, on with Shark. Always, enjoy getting a chance to chop it up with them, but you as well, Ronald. Appreciate the invite, man. Whenever you want to, come on and talk ball, we can come on and talk ball, man. Like Josh said, it's 8 a.m. in Australia, and he's here to talk about some NBA basketball, right? And I'll do it at 2:30 a.m. if I needed to in Virginia, right? So shout out to you guys for just for you, Ronald, for just getting this collective panel together, man. I appreciate the opportunity. I think just listening to the discussion, it makes me lean a little bit more towards Boston, right? just a tad bit more towards Boston. But like I said, no official tickets for me at all yet, Ronald. And just for all the viewers, we appreciate you guys for being here as well. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to Ronald's content if you haven't. He's doing this stuff daily, giving out free picks. So yeah, definitely do that. And that's all I got, Ronald. Appreciate you having me again.
Yeah, let's close out with this real quick, because I loved being able to moderate with these guys, because they had so many different opinions, so many different breakdowns and analysis. I do want to lean towards Golden State for the first game, and just kind of take it game by game. I think I want to be able to see how and gauge how these teams adjust from game to game. Like if someone's going to have a terrible shooting night, do I think they're going to be able to bounce back off of that? That might kind of affect how I choose to bet the next game. So for me, it's really hard to pick a winner for the series, and I just want to take it game by game. But if I really had to, gun to head, I would probably lean towards the Warriors here. I know I'm probably towards the minority, especially on this panel here, but I would lean towards them. But like I said, I'm not going to put money on it. I'm just going to go game by game and see what type of adjustments are going to be made by both teams here. And with that note, it is the end of the show, guys. So all those who tuned in on YouTube and Twitter, if you are on Twitter, on YouTube, just make sure you hit the like and subscribe button before you bounce. Make sure you check out the links in the description below as well. And I always have to end with this: whether you fade us or follow us, it's on you guys to make that call. Good luck on all your action. Till next time, peace.